Hey everyone, welcome back to Trucker Mommy. Today I'm going to be talking about two things. One, what is a typical, these are answered questions from you all. So, one is, what is a typical day like in trucking, in driving a dump truck? And two, how do we get paid? So, before I get into that, please, if you're new here, hit the subscribe button. If you like and comment and share, that supports my channel and it's really encouraging too. And also when you comment, then it gives me ideas for what y'all would like to hear from me about, and that's great. And I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for everyone who has put some comments down there. It's really helpful for me. So let's get started on how do we get paid. Someone asked if we're paid by the ton, and the answer to that is sometimes. Typically not. Typically we're paid by the hour, and if we're driving for somebody, now that's owner operators. For people who drive for a company, it's always by the hour. But for owner operators, occasionally we are paid by the ton. It just depends on the job. It depends on the company. It depends on how the company is paying. The way that it works, there's layers of contractors and subcontractors and subs under the subs even. There's different tiers, they're called, or layers. And so it depends on who we are working with, what our contractor, how they are paid. So as far as, but typically we're paid per hour. So, and the rates, they vary depending on which company we're working with, and usually they're pretty standard across the board, but it can be a little different. But anyway, a typical day in trucking, some of it is typical and some of it is not. The one typical thing is usually I would need to leave the house around 6 to get wherever it is I'm going on time. But as far as a typical day, it depends on the job. If I'm staying at a job that's more long term, then my days tend to look fairly the same for a while. However, sometimes I'm at a different place, like every day for a long time. So then my days look very different. The kinds of things we haul in trucking, contaminated soil, I shouldn't say in trucking, I'm sorry, with the dump truck, we can haul contaminated soil, just common or compactable fill is another word for it. Sand, class 5, there's different rocks that we can haul. We also can haul rubble, unless the truck has an aluminum box, and then can't haul rubble, can't haul some of those bigger rocks, because it'll beat up the box. Aluminum is too soft, so you need a steel box for that. We have steel boxes for our trucks, so we do haul rubble. Sometimes in winter, places will clean out ponds, so then we haul like pond scum, and that stuff is pretty nasty, but it's okay because it gets us through the winter months sometimes. Sometimes we haul snow in winter. So sometimes we haul demo. So like if a building has been torn down, there can be all kinds of stuff in there, bricks and rebar, and just depends what was demolished. So I think I've even hauled like tree branches and stuff. So whatever fits, whatever needs to be hauled from the job, pretty much. But usually it's sand or gravel or dirt. So a typical day, yeah, there isn't really a typical day. I'd say an ideal day. An ideal day for me, a more average day is we typically, I guess, we haul maybe a usual day is where we haul maybe 4 to 8 loads for the day. And usually like we'll have a longer driving distance. So between loads, I've had days where I just sit. The best job I've ever had, I sat for like 4 or 5 hours while getting loaded with one load, and then I go dump that load and it's just 5 minutes away. Then come back, get loaded again, and again I'm waiting 4 or 5 hours. And then I dumped a load and sign out for the day. 10-hour day, and I spent like $40 and $40 in fuel for the day. 10 hours. So in 10 hours I made over $1,000 and spent 40 in fuel. That was great. That was awesome. That is not a typical day in trucking. Typically we are running all day, and we can work anywhere from usually at least 8 hours, 8 to 10 hours per day. So I guess there is kind of a typical day, but mostly, yeah, it depends on the job. So getting more details, so like lunch. What do we do for lunch? Do we have a lunch break? That wasn't a question that anybody asked, but I'm just throwing it out there. No, we do not get a lunch break. So if I wanted to take an hour off to eat my lunch, which would not make any sense at all, people who go into trucking and have their own truck want to be there to make more money, not less. So I would never take time off just to eat. But we could do that theoretically if we wanted to. Typically we eat in the truck, either while we're waiting to get loaded or whatever. You got to pack a lunch. Don't typically get to stop and get a meal because, again, we're typically paid by the hour. So what that means is timing is critical. Timing is key. We do not want to waste time. Again, we're working with contractors. They keep track of our time, always keep track of our time. And if there's one or two trucks that tend to, or if there's specific trucks that tend to lag behind other people, there are kind of little hierarchies within trucking. So there's different lists. They have like an A list and a B list and like a Z list. You don't want to be Z listed. It's actually, they use another name for it, but that's the name I'll use. So for people who show up on time in the morning, work hard, keep up with everybody else, and do a good job, and do not make unsafe work conditions at the job site and the dump site, those people will be more likely to put on the A list, especially if they work Saturdays, which is another thing. There's not much work on weekends in construction. Nobody wants to work on the weekends. But sometimes projects are needing to be finished, and sometimes that requires weekend work. I don't work weekends because I have kids that are young, and when I got into trucking, my youngest was 2, and already spent enough time away from them during the week. I did not want to take even more time and also have to find somebody to watch them on the weekend. So I just don't work weekends. So that already disqualifies me from the A list pretty much because I'm not available 24/7. There's also night jobs sometimes, once in a while. It's not very usual, but sometimes, like if they're working on the highway, we have interstates here, so they typically shut them down at night because there's less traffic. And so those are really, I don't know, I've never worked on the actual highway itself. I did work a job where we were on the shoulders and the like the ditch, but not the actual highway. And that was a really nice job, but it was far away. So I'd have to leave the house at around 5:30 and drive like an hour away for a 6:30 start, and then we'd be there usually 12 hours. That job ran several weeks, and it was a really, really nice job to be at. It was not a lot of driving distance, but we had a lot of waiting time, a lot of downtime, which is kind of nice. So I've worked so many jobs though, and I don't usually forget the jobs. There's so many. Even light rail alone, that's one project, but it has so many different sites. I don't think I could even list them all off to you right now if I tried, because there's sites from Minneapolis to Eden Prairie, and there's several cities in between. And so if you think about it, every single square foot of that new railway system has to be laid down. All those tracks have to be laid down, and all that has to be dug out and prepped first. So there's a lot of sites just for that job alone. And I have not only worked on the light rail project, I've worked small jobs and big jobs and medium-sized jobs. I've worked in a little corner of a parking lot where they were making a kind of like park with a small little ice skating rink and a warming house. I've worked where we're taking dirt out to a horse farm and a cow pasture and all kinds of jobs. So I've worked where we're at a school and we're hauling some dirt from one side of, it's not even a field, like from one tiny little spot over here, just a few feet away, and done like over, I don't know my biggest count for one day. I know it was well over 30 loads. I want to say closer to 60, but I might be off on that. That's been a while. That was several years ago. I think I was still driving for a company back then. So many loads. And my least favorite job is where I'm on site and we're just getting loaded and dumping continuously. It's my least favorite in regards to what I have to do, but also as an owner operator, it's nice because the fuel cost is low. So as long as it's a job, it's a job. Like, I don't really care what we're doing too much as long as we're getting paid, right? I don't work for free. So I don't like working jobs as much where there's a likelihood of damage to my truck in any way. That's why I don't really like the on-site, because they tend to overload because we're not going on the highway and there's no scales to weigh the material. And so they want to move things quickly. And that's really hard on the truck's suspension system and the dumping mechanism and everything. It's hard on the mast that lifts and lowers the box. I do not like being overloaded in my truck. If it's a company vehicle and the company wants us to do that, it's their equipment, not mine. But in my truck and my equipment, I do not appreciate having, because we're only paid to haul so many tons per vehicle. They don't pay us extra if they're overloading us. So in a Quint, which is the only kind of dump truck I've driven, it's a Quint axle. So there's the steers in front, there's the duals in the back, so that there's eight tires, right? 1, 2 on the driver's side, 1, 2 on the passenger side on the rear, and then the rear drives, and then also on the front drives. So that's 8, and then the steers, and that's what steers the truck. So the front. Then on a Quint, there's 3. They're called drop axles or lift axles, and there's that's another 6. Because there's one on either side per axle. So I have a quad, but I have never driven it for work. I have a driver for the quad. So Quint, we can haul in our vehicle 19 tons. In the quad, 17 tons. So overloading happens way more than it should. And it's really silly because it doesn't help us as truck owners. It doesn't help us at all, other than keeping the contractors that we're working under happy because they get the job done quicker. But it's less money in our pocket because we're paid per hour. So usually, that's one of the not so pleasant things about driving truck. Nobody wants to fight about the weight of the load. It's just a pain. And some contractors are really great about not overloading, and then some just have a reputation for overloading, not just overloading, but way overloading, and that's rough. Because I want to work, I want the trucks to work, and I also don't want the trucks to be damaged because they're hauling more than they're built to handle. Another kind of job I don't like for trucking is going to landfills. Though unfortunately, with light rail, that's a lot of what it is going to landfills, because we are hauling out often contaminated soil, and contaminated soil needs to be dumped at a landfill. So the reason I don't like going to landfills is they have sharps, nails, wires, rebar, screws, pieces of metal, tin, things like that can wreck our tires. I have eaten up so many tires from going to landfills. And tires are not cheap. In US dollars, they've gone up since I started trucking too, but if a steer gets ruined, typically we have to buy the pair because that's our front axle. We don't want to have uneven tires up there because now we'll have alignment issues and all kinds of things, and it's just a mess. So typically if one steer goes out, we got to buy 2, and that is they're close to, six, I don't know, off the top of my head, 600 to 800 each. So close to $2,000 just for that, if we ruin one steer tire. So they're not cheap. Then the drive axle tires, sometimes we can get by with, if there's some wear on them, getting a used tire just to get us by until it's time to buy a new set. But you're still looking at least a couple hundred per tire, at least, between buying the tire and then having them put it on. So the push axle tires on those are not quite as spendy usually, but even, at least 100, just if, and not a brand new tire. Brand new tires cost more than that, but I'm going to say $250 minimum, 300, something like that, at least. And that's just off the top of my head. I could be wrong on those numbers. It's probably more than that now, but so being aware, because when I was a driver and I was not responsible for the cost of tires, it was still worth my while to take care of the truck, because any downtime, then I was not getting paid, or I was getting significantly less money for that time. So I really tried to take care of my truck even before I had my own, so that I didn't have to be sitting. But I'd still go through tires, because we were in landfills every day back then too. So on the worst day to go to a landfill is during or after a rain, because the water, it pushes up all the screws and, anything heavy, it just floats to the top. For what I don't, that doesn't make any sense, but that's just the way it works. The nails and screws and metal and everything, it just comes to the top after it rains, because all the dirt gets washed away, I guess. So, and the rocks and everything too. So why it's bad, in addition to those things coming to the surface, is the ground is soft underneath, so then things can sink in easier, but also it's harder to gain traction. And so what happens is the tires might spin, and once those tires start to spin in one spot, it catches everything. It catches all those nails and screws and metal and rocks and everything. And so when I was a driver one time, I got a big old rock this long stuck between my tires, and it actually popped one of those tires off the rim. And I waited a long time for the service truck to come and replace those tires, man. So I've had wire poked through tires, I've had nails and screws, and I've had pieces of metal just scrape. And typically either during or after a rain, because that's when they're occasionally I've had things happen to tires on a nice sunny day when the ground isn't soft, especially if they're having a stump in a really bad place, but that's less likely to happen. So it does happen though. So I don't like landfills either. I don't like being overloaded, and I don't like landfills, and I don't like working on site as much, because that's typically when we get overloaded and it's tiring. But I don't mind as long as I get to keep making that income. So I'll work any job. I will also, if I have to, if I have to sign out because it's unsafe or whatever. There have been occasions where I've had to sign out from a job, but that's pretty darn rare. Yeah, typically places are pretty accommodating. One day, and that was back when I was a driver, we were dumping, and the place where we were dumping at, it was so slick, for lack of a better word, that I actually bumped into another truck. I didn't hurt either the truck I was driving or the other truck. It didn't hurt them, but our fenders touched, just touched. Didn't hurt them at all. But after that, I went and I talked to whoever was in charge, and I'm like, we can't keep dumping here. Either we need to sign out, which is what I wanted to do, to be honest with you. After that, I was a little bit shaken up because that it was a near. We could have damaged some things that day, so like I don't want to do this again. Can we just sign out for the day? But instead, what they did is they found another place for us to dump that wasn't so muddy, and we kept working. So that's cool too. I've driven in thunderstorms and when there's lightning everywhere. And as long as a contractor wants to keep going, usually I will keep going. There's another day too where there's ice on the road, and it was before a stop sign, and it was downhill, and it was really hard to stop because of the ice on the road. And excuse me, somebody asked, like, why can't somebody take care of that ice so we can keep going without it being a safety hazard? That road, it teed into another road, and the traffic on that road didn't have to stop. So I think several of the people working on that project were very, very close to being involved in a pretty nasty accident. Some of them almost flew over into the ditch on the other side. I think there's a pond or a lake or something on the other side of the road. We had to shut that one down for the day. So yeah, a lot of things happen when we're driving truck, and sometimes I miss it and sometimes I don't. It's hard being home too, because anytime a driver calls, I'm anticipating bad news. I don't know why I do that. Usually it's nothing. Occasionally there's a problem, but usually everything's okay. But I know that in trucking, anything can happen. So the anticipation, it can be a little bit difficult, at least for me. Maybe that will go away. Maybe eventually I won't have that, but yeah, I'm not used to being just home. So it's hard driving too, because like, especially when I know I'm in a place where things are likely to happen, and no matter how careful I am, I could still get a nail in my tire. I could still have somebody overload my truck, and I don't know, it's not that big of a deal. At the end of the day, we deal with what comes up. I think, what's the worst thing that can happen? If the truck breaks down or something, that's not the worst thing. I'm coming from a school bus driving point of view. The worst thing that can happen is there's a fatal accident or something. That's the worst thing. So if we're coming home at the end of the day everybody gets to come home, then it was still a good day. And any breakdowns or anything that happens like that, we will deal with it. That's part of what tax write-offs, right? Gotta have tax write-offs, gotta have business expense. So don't go looking for it, but it'll happen on its own. So last year I had a leak in my coolant line, or antifreeze coolant, because it's summer. So just one of the clamps around the hose was loose. So I had to get that fixed and had to have the engine all cleaned up so I didn't have coolant splashed all over it. That was a mess, but we dealt with it. I was able to drive it slowly to the shop, and they got it in the next day, and then I was back on the road, I think the day after that. So we just deal with it as it comes. So that's why I say typical days are the typical days, kind of, right? When everything works out and we only have maybe 4 or 5 loads and we get a good 8 to 10 hours in. I'm still not home usually in a typical day until at least 6 p.m. So sometimes later, sometimes 8. I don't get to see my kids very much when I'm driving. But then in winter, a lot of times we're home for a while, so I'd like to say it evens out. It doesn't really, though, because now they're in school. And the time to be out and doing things, really, you want to go out in summer. So, yeah. But, yeah, I'm going to take a peek at my phone because I know there were more questions than that. And I want to get to some of those now while I have time. Sorry, someone was calling me. It can be hard finding time to record. Sometimes I'm still trying to sneak it in and balance that with kids and everything. So one of my last videos I talked about mental health. And there aren't really questions on that one. Sorry. Let me go back to my other. Sorry, I need to write these down. They are written down on my channel, but I wish I had written them down where it's easier to find. Sorry, someone keeps calling me. That's really annoying. Okay, so Debbie asked, how many hours does a dump trucker get to do in a day? I think I already answered that pretty well. Typically 8 to 10. In summer, up to even 12, sometimes 14 hours. In winter, probably more like 6 to 8. But sometimes even as many as 9 or 10. Keep in mind that in Minnesota, in winter, it gets dark earlier. By around 4 or 5, the sun is set, and we don't typically we work during the day. We don't typically work in the dark. So I have worked in the dark. I've never worked a night job, but I have worked in the dark because they've kept me there that long. And typically I will stay until I'm not needed anymore. So someone is asking if I can do a vlog with my husband. I don't know. I don't know. Obviously, I'm not going to do that right now. I don't know how we would do that because we each have our own channels. So that's a tricky one, but we'll try to sort it out. Maybe we'll have to start a channel that we share. That's not his or mine. I'll come back to that. So yeah, I've got a lot of subscribers from my husband's channel. Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate you supporting my channel and coming over from his. Someone was asking, okay, no, that's one I've actually, oh, what it's like being a trucker and a mom. I kind of talked about that already, like how to balance trucking and taking care of kids. I kind of talked about that already, that it's difficult because of time, because we're so tired after driving all day. I think there's a leap from driving 8 hours to driving 10 plus hours. Driving 8 hours, sometimes I can handle some things, some extra stuff in the evening, like cooking and stuff like that. But after working 10 or more hours in one day, I'm just so tired. And there's a sensation that I feel after driving that long. If I'm standing up, I feel like there's still motion. Like my body is moving in space. Like I'm still in the truck. And I get dizzy and I just need to lay down because it's just too long of a day. So in summer, we do often work those 10 plus hour days. So it's not really something I would recommend for someone who has very young children because you're not going to spend very much quality time with them. However, we also do what we need to for our children so that they have the things that they need to succeed in life. If that means working 10 plus hour days so that we can pay for them to go to a decent school and have a decent place to live and a reliable vehicle to take them where they need to go, be it school or their doctors or out for fun or whatever. Sometimes we have to weigh the pros and cons and decide what is most important. And for me, I decided that I needed to go and work so that I could provide more for my kids and support my husband, because I could see that he was struggling to pay for everything on his own. Not that he couldn't. My husband's very resourceful. He doesn't need my help. However, doesn't need my help. He could still use my help. And by us teaming up together financially, we can go places quicker than if it was him alone. And that brings me to this last question on here that I've just found. There's no name with this, but someone is asking to share about interracial marriages. This video is already pretty lengthy, and I would be wise to stop here and say that's a topic for another day. But why not? Let's touch on it. Interracial marriage. And I might talk about it later too, because I haven't really thought about this one much yet. Honestly, when we think about marriage, bringing two people together, it's always hard, right? It's always complicated because you are not marrying yourself. You're marrying somebody who is they're a complete, independent, owned individual. And you're going to clash no matter who they are. You're going to have difficulties fitting together. So in an interracial marriage, I don't even think about like, oh, my husband's has a different skin tone than me. I don't even think like that on a day-to-day basis until like people point it out to me. I'm aware at home. My kids are super aware. My 7-year-old, I don't know, he was seeing kind of goofy or something, I think, and he was looking at his baby sister and he's like, Mommy, she has like, I'm seeing some white spots on her face. And so I'm like, okay, well, look at me. Do you still see those white spots? Because like I was aware there's something up with his eyes. And I kid you not, he told me, well, Mommy, your face is already white. I'm like, it's not like paper white, dude. Like, oh my goodness. So it's interesting. There are differences, yeah, in that respects, but in other respects, when I go out and people see me with my kids, I have been asked occasionally if they're my foster children. Some people find it hard to believe that they're actually my flesh and blood children, that I carried them for 9 months inside of me and I gave birth to them. They are my children. These are my kids, biological children. So some people find that hard to believe for whatever reason. Although I will say that is pretty rare to find that. So that's another reason why we live in the metro, why we don't move out to the countryside more, because we fit in better in the cities, and more the heart of the city or the suburbs of the city. We fit in better. So as far as other aspects to our relationship, I could talk about all kinds of things, but I don't know what the point of it would be. I've heard from some people in my husband's side of things that like it's bad to cross over, whatever. I mean, that was Malcolm X's whole point, right? We should not mingle with the white people. They should stay over there. We should be over here, and we should not marry them, and they should not. I think that's silly and dangerous, potentially. I understand his point, from where he was coming from, but I don't agree with it. I respect his opinion, but I don't agree with it. I think there's nothing wrong with having, well, obviously, because I'm in one, there's nothing wrong with the interracial marriage. Nothing wrong with it at all. So it's got its own set of challenges, but like what kind of challenges? Like, I don't know, what do we eat? My husband was raised eating certain foods. I was raised eating other kinds of certain foods, so we can work that out. What else? Family. We don't live with our family. We live with each other and our kids. We don't live with our in-laws. I don't live with my mom or my brothers and sister. I don't live with his, well, that's another story. We did live with my in-laws for a while, but it wasn't permanent, and we all survived. We all got out of that okay, and so it's all good. It's all good. It's fun because being in a relationship, it should challenge us. It should challenge us and push us to be a better version of ourselves, in my opinion. It's not, I don't really buy into the whole your husband should make you happy or your spouse should make you happy thing. Like, there's more, it's nice when he does nice things for me and stuff, and we do nice things for each other and all that. But that's not the whole point of being together. The point of being in a relationship is to do life together and to build something with each other. And it's not always pretty, but it doesn't have to be. And I dare say I wouldn't want it to be, because it wouldn't be real. I'm in a real marriage. We've been together for more than 10 years. We haven't been married quite 10 years yet, but will be soon. And we've had our moments, but what relationship hasn't? I think he's a pretty cool guy. And if I had to do it all over again, I'd still probably be stuck with him, because he's just, I don't know, there's just something about my husband that he's just unique. He's himself, and I've never met a person quite like him ever in my whole life. He challenges me, he irritates me in ways that nobody has ever. But he pushes me to do good things, and he, like that, I don't know, he just so different. But the race thing, like, we're all human beings, for crying out loud. It's not like the difference between a bird and a hippopotamus or something. We're both human beings. So we were raised in somewhat similar ways as far as the cultures. Some of our culture actually overlaps, because some of it is universal. Some of the way that we were raised is universal. So we do have a lot in common too, and it's great. There's both good and bad, but I wouldn't leave the bad for the good that I have in my relationships. So I don't know. As far as that goes, if you are thinking about like a interracial relationship and you're on the fence about it, just go for it. Why the heck not? Just try it out. You don't have to marry somebody, but you can still date someone or something. Just try it out. But there's nothing wrong with being in a interracial marriage. So if that's what you would like to do, that marriage is a very personal decision. So anyway, there weren't any other questions that I could find. I know some comments are on some of my older videos, and I think I addressed those already. If I haven't, my apologies. I will try to look through and make sure, but please keep commenting, and I do have some ideas for what to do in the future already, but I would like you guys to keep, and gals, ladies, to keep letting me know what you'd like to hear about. And I still haven't really heard from anybody about your New Year's resolutions, if you're keeping up on those or not. And so if I could just hear from one person, that would be awesome. Could just one person comment and let me know, how is it going? please. And again, if you haven't yet, please subscribe to my channel, like this video, share, comment down below. That'd be great. And we will see you next time. All right. Bye.